Hi, my name is Dr. Karen Samonds. Many thanks for the invitation to participate in this workshop. And apologies for not being able to attend live as I had hoped, but I do look forward to seeing some of the recorded sessions and certainly continuing the discussion after the workshop's finished. So as a paleontologist, my research broadly is focused largely on what we can learn about Madagascar's past, present, and future by exploring the diversity of its closely related and recently extinct subfossil members. And so while I have worked throughout the island, my two main subfossil sites are both within the island's central highlands. So this provides a great opportunity to study an environment that's really changed greatly. So in this map, you can see, right, the traditional sort of west is dry and east is wet when we are looking at our modern groups. But the central highlands, currently devoid of forests, and which makes it a really interesting question to look at the groups that lived there in the past. And so as you see, unlike the modern division, east wet and west dry, we have subfossils that are not only distributed throughout the island, but also in the middle. So this is pretty compelling evidence that for this part of Madagascar did have habitats that supported some of these really specialized animals. And so the groups that I work with when we look at Madagascar subfossils include animals from the late Pleistocene and Holocene, some that got quite large, like our giant lemurs and elephant birds, and others that were small, like pygmy hippos. And our deepest glimpse in time is at approximately 80,000 years ago. Now, these groups suffered a megafaunal extinction, again, widely believed to have been induced by humans, either directly or indirectly, aided by late Pleistocene and Holocene climate change. But because both vertebrates, as shown here, and invertebrates have grassland specialists, these animals can provide really important context for what landscapes might have looked like. And my work with colleagues such as Dr. Brooke Crowley, Dr. Laurie Godfrey, and Dr. James Hansford has really focused on which now extinct taxa maintained grazer-adapted grasses and how extensive these grasslands were before human arrival. Now, when we look at the Central Highlands, we think about the animals that we see, we do know that there's a very large diversity of lemur species, some of which were clearly arboreal, relying on forest habitats like sloth lemurs. We see pygmy hippos, again, common in the subfossil record. Crocodilians, at least two types. And then, of course, our elephant birds, which played a very valuable role in the ecosystem dynamics, and tortoises. Giant tortoise fossils are actually common but poorly understood, but they're especially interesting for this debate, right? Because it's been suggested that tortoises might have been responsible for maintaining grasslands in the Central Highlands, but we've been really lacking direct tortoise isotope data. So my team and close colleagues now have some preliminary isotopic data as well as ancient DNA for tortoises to try to sort out their taxonomy and understand the landscapes that they occupied. So of the two sites that I've been working in the Central Highlands, both of them are high altitude Central Highlands sites in the middle of the island, which is interesting because most of those sites in this map here you can see are distributed around the edge, right? So they tend to be lowland sites, often caves, but these are both surface sites. Ampasambazimba is a mid-elevation, high elevation site. It's the type and the only locality for the largest subfossil lemur, Archaeoindris, and it has largely been converted to agriculture. So this is a site that was discovered in the early 20th century. But in 2018, I did conduct a new excavation at Ampasambazimba, primarily to look for Archaeoindri. But what we found was a diversity of both vertebrate and invertebrate fossils, as well as thousands of seeds. So we have seeds and leaves, we have fossil wood, including entire parts of trees and logs. So we've been doing sediment coring, looking at pollen, microfossils, and change through time. Here are some of the vertebrate fossils. So we see, again, large diversity of lemurs, elephant birds, hippos, crocs, tortoises. Saramudi is another high elevation site in the Central Highlands that preserves a very interesting and unique lake community. It also straddles the sort of late glacial and post-glacial time period vertebrate community, which gives a really interesting insight into what was going on. Now, this site has been the subject of was subject of a Fulbright, as well as a Malagasy Paleontological Field School. So I've done a lot of training with the University of Antananarivo. And this site is also, it's very difficult to excavate. Largely, it's been converted to agriculture, but it's been a great place to bring both American and Malagasy students for training and to get them experience looking for fossils, learning techniques in fossil collection, but also in coring. And so one of my students specifically has been looking at pollen, changes in pollen through time. And you can see that in this just very preliminary representation, we can see that there is in upper stratigraphic levels where grass abundance rises to 45%. So there's some really interesting things that you can do looking at pollen and changes through time where you have good preservation. So this site, Saramudi, we wrote the very first paper about it in 2019. And again, it preserves a very interesting wetlands community. So we have lots of lake birds, hippos, crocodilians, tortoises, but there's a lot more we could do at this site. In addition, I wanted to bring attention to this picture of me with my Malagasy students. All of them have been co-authors. They were co-authors on this paper, and four of them, the four in this picture, are all pursuing work on subfossils at these sites, doing work on pollen, crocodilians, faunal communities, and lake birds. So again, I look forward to hearing more about the kinds of questions that all of you want to ask, ways that we can work together, and how specifically these two subfossil sites might contribute to these goals. Great, thanks very much.